I must say that morals of Russian soldiers are falling with every day. We can see that there is a lot of young guys which are not experienced and they don't understand where they are. So I was starting this initiative on Twitter, like with a little bit of irony or jokes, that we could suggest, some thousand euros or quid or pounds to everybody who lie down weapons from Russian troops and go over. But in fact, it's turning not into the joke. I think that such announcements from Stratcom would be extremely positive. So yes, they can kill a lot of civilians in Ukraine using their firepower, but on the other hand, their soldier capacity and morals I don't see so far, because they are waging occupational war. And I think it's highly important that we are raising also our communication systems, so we try to deliver to Russian population what is happening to their soldiers, and that also Russian population in Russia is at least partly responsible for such type of leadership actions.
Thank you very much indeed. May I ask, ministers, forgive me, I'm looking at the Foreign Minister of Lithuania here. How do you assess the Russian perspective on this war? You have much better links into Russia than we do. Do you see the level of support diminishing? Do you see any change in the reaction?
Well, first of all, hello, and I would like to start off saying thanks for everything that you're doing. And your government was incredibly active in their response, and in many cases leading with suggestions, and also taking a step in many rightful directions. So that it was very well noted and noted here in the region. So what we're seeing now is, and I think it was mentioned by artists that the war is not going the way that it was planned, if one can say that it was planned at all. But today it is getting clear that that Putin has no boundaries to what instruments he's going to use and unleash against Ukrainians. The indiscriminate shelling of districts in Kharkiv, in other towns, killing of civilians shows that he will go far, and it is possible that that this war will become a massacre, and the world will have to answer to the very important question: what is our stance to this? Because already the images that are reaching us, they already pose the questions. So I would like to draw a basic principle, if I may, of where my government stands, is that we are at the point where half measures will no longer work, and this principle has to be applied in all respects. First of all, when we're talking about aiding Ukraine, there cannot be half measures. We have to do everything in our power to help them. Providing lethal weaponry, artists said that they're doing that. We're also doing that. I think all three Baltic states are, doing as much as we can. But we have to convince the countries who started sending that this is just the first step. We need to go further, and we need to do more. Secondly, I think that we're approaching the point where we'll have to discuss the need for humanitarian corridors. There are already territories under Russian control where people are, many of them are injured. From the images that we see, maybe they are even killed. They might lack water, food supplies, and all of that. We need to secure the corridors that they would be allowed to leave. A way to do it is securing a no-fly zones for the humanitarian needs. I think it will, with every passing hour, I won't say even the day, it will become more needed. Secondly, there cannot be half measures when it comes to sanctions. We have to raise a question about energy imports from Russia. I know that it's a very sensitive subject to many, but it has to be raised, we have to go all in. And thirdly, this is about our region. For almost 20 years, we've been discussing the need to deter. I think this stage is over. We need to talk about defense. And when we're talking about defense, I say that basically Baltic states are approaching the situation where we see us a bit like Western Berlin. That means that we need anti-air, anti-rocket. We need all the credibility to defend the territory as NATO would defend any other territory in its alliance. Again, no half measures will suffice. I think that a few days ago we said that the world is changing. The thing is that with every passing day, the world keeps on changing. Now the question is, what result do we want to for us and for our children that this world would stop at? So thank you. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Thanks very much, Bob.
Can I ask on two lines of questions, and good morning to you all. Firstly, I'm going to come secondly to issues about ethnic Russian territory in the Baltic, in the three Baltic republics. But just quickly before I do, a question for Dr. Previks about the state of the Russian military. I mean, I just look, as from his point of view as a defence minister and deputy prime minister, what's gone wrong? The Russians spent the first decade of this century developing their integrated sort of characteristics of war, the military and the non-military, and the unification of these. From Georgia through to Syria, they reinvested and redeveloped their conventional forces. But looking at the way that the Russian troops are behaving in Ukraine now, I just feel we're back in the 1980s and that the post-Cold War era didn't happen. Is that because of they've missed out on morale, or they haven't focused enough on logistics, or is it just a ridiculous sort of foolish cockiness in the same way that they sort of bimbled into Chechnya in the first Chechen war and got shot up badly in Grozny? How do you explain concisely why they are making such a moral and military mess of the situation? You're on mute, sir.
Minister, we can't hear you.
Apologize. Sorry. Thank you for the question. And I guess the in-depth assessment should be made later. But as a person who was forced to serve also in Soviet military, I would say that this is a traditional mess which follows Russian army wherever it goes. In some actions they could succeed, but in general, my impression is that, they approached the Ukrainian border and then they were telling, all right, now we cross the border and we will see how it goes. And of course, I think they were fed either with wrong information or simply they were really, as you told, too cocky to imagine that Ukrainians will expect them with sunflowers, but they expect them, with your anti-tank weapons and our Stingers and etc. So I think this is a tradition of Russian army, which obviously follows them with. And also, I am doubting also the information what Kremlin and others are receiving. What is this information line between down to up? And they also have this long tradition, for instance, never to inform their soldiers about their mission, because soldiers do not have value. I don't know, is it correct information what was yesterday published, but it seems that Russian Defense Ministry was giving information that they might compensate families of fallen soldiers a certain amount of money. The certain amount of money is about 90 euros. So if it is true, you understand what it tells about Russian soldiers. So they were not prepared. Yes, they have a capacity, but this capacity they will use without any limitations against civilians. And they simply will be ready to terrorize, to marauder, and simply to make mess in Ukraine, to make people scared. But the result will be that Ukrainians will stand even more, because this is a 40-million nation. And they have an enormous resistance feeling at this moment. They are defending their families. So, and I apologize, you told something about Russian territories or Baltics or not?
There's just the second question for all three of you, whoever wants to answer. One still assumes that a direct invasion of your territories is very unlikely, and not least because of your NATO membership. But given sort of GRU activity in the past 25, 30 years, both in Russia and elsewhere, it's not impossible that the Russian agencies will start planting bombs or pretending that there are ethnic Russians in your countries who will get murdered by sort of fascists, etc., etc. I mean, I do find it very ironic they're denazifying a country by trying to kill a Jewish leader, but that's just part of that weird irrationality. Putin came to power allegedly on the back of the Moscow apartment bombs. And there's evidence since that the FSB might have had a hand in that, as shocking as that sounds. So it's not impossible that they will try to do similar things in your countries. So are you most threatened by a conventional military invasion, or are you most threatened by this sort of destabilizing violent acts done by Russians who may not even be your citizens?
Clear. My last answer, and I apologize, I have to run them back to cabinet. Before I answer, I simply wanted to say that I completed my PhD on ethnic relations and nationalism, so this is my academic story. I can speak very long. In short, I have been facing such questions quite a bit since 2014. I would say we feel quite confident. We feel quite confident. First of all, we cannot imagine here basically kind of larger numbers of green men. Secondly, even if this Ukrainian war will radicalize certain parts of people here, these parts will be not large, and it creates a confusion in ethnic Russian population in, for instance, Latvia. And I would say this will allow us to consolidate our population even more. And our societies are small. We know people in face. And we never, in reality, had any kind of ethnic conflicts in our societies. Even in the late 80s and early 90s, there were no ethnic conflicts when we were fighting for our freedom. And now, 30 years later, in short, we are quite confident that there is no possibility to use such forces against us in our territory. I'm really quite confident. Thank you. And thank you for my possibility to talk to you. I have to leave now.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Briefly ask the Estonian and Lithuanian representatives just to very briefly answer that point as well. Are you confident about the situation in your own countries, especially with sort of agitators and provocateurs?
Minister Limets, when I was first in Estonia, forgive me, there was a lot of warning to British troops to be careful of provocateurs. Do you have the same issue today?
Thank you also first for this opportunity to speak with you today. We really appreciate your strong support, your presence, your decision to double your presence in terms of troops presence here. And with regard to situation in Estonia at the moment, Estonia has a Russian-speaking minority, and this is well integrated into our society. Of course, we have to follow which kind of disinformation comes from Russia to Estonia, but we don't see any particular tensions related to the war in Ukraine at the moment. So the situation is more or less similar, but it has been, but of course we raise our awareness about the situation so that we are prepared. At the same time, of course, for us, it is important that internationally we do everything possible to raise the cost for aggressor, so that the aggressor would stop the war. It is therefore very important that we politically isolate Russia, and here we very much hope that the United Kingdom is internationally a leading country to do these efforts also in the International Criminal Court, because these perpetrators must be brought under the justice. And of course, other two things which I would like to emphasize are related to support to Ukraine. It was mentioned here, and I very much agree that in Ukraine we have different scenarios how the developments may process, and we have to be prepared for long-term support for Ukraine, and at the same time we have to continue this quick support, political support, economic support, humanitarian support, and also military support. And last but not least, I want to come back to this NATO's assessment of the current security situation in Europe, and also that we need just our defense and the deterrence posture. We must to strengthen it, and definitely we should go from forward deterrence to forward defense, because the power of balance has changed and the security situation in Europe has changed. One more time, we are very thankful for the UK for active support to our region at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And from the Estonian perspective, I've just been hearing reports that Estonia is massively increasing its defence budget as well. I don't know whether you can confirm that, and the increase in purchase of equipment as well.
Yes, about 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, we discussed it in our government. We increased our budget. At the moment, it is about 2.5% from our GDP by 2024. And we do additional adjustments, but I would like to say that Estonia's percentage from defense budget from the GDP has been over 2% already since 2014. But of course, we very much hope that we get also NATO support, because though our defense expenditure is increasing, it is not enough to quickly build up strong enough military defense. So here we rely on our NATO's joint actions.
Thank you. Liam, who wants to come in?
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to be together with allies this morning. I just wanted to ask two questions. The first question is just to ask your insight into potential divisions within the Russian leadership about the conduct of the campaign. So my understanding is that Gerasimov's basic plan was for the deployment of Spetsnaz and paratroopers together with significant Chechen resources, followed by the installation of Viktor Medvedchuk as a puppet leader. But there are now some serious divisions within the Russian leadership who are seriously concerned about the potential for Chechen brigades to inflict very significant civilian casualties. And there are obviously concerns about Medvedchuk as well. There are differences of opinion about his credentials. Do you have any insight from your sources into how the top of the Russian military and the top of Russian politics is now feeling about the conduct of the campaign over the weeks to come? Can I put that to you both? Maybe I could ask our Estonian colleague first.
I'm afraid you're on mute still.
Yes, thank you. What we really see here is that there is one of the very likely scenarios is that we must be prepared to Syria-type war, that it's long-term and it's not only military infrastructure is targeted in Ukraine, but also civil population. And we see it from different directions how based on how Russia's troops are moving towards bigger cities. And this is unfortunately one of the scenarios we have to be prepared to.
Okay, thank you. Gabrielas?
Well, to be honest, we're seeing that there is some discontent about the actions, but it's not intelligence. It's basically what we have from the public channels. We're seeing Gerasimov's eye roll on the video. We're seeing how the central bank president is, putting her hands in reaction to what Putin is saying. So obviously, many of them understand the situation that they are in, but the chain of command is constructed so that it's almost impossible at this stage to overrule or even advise Putin to do something else. Therefore, we have a leader who invested basically all his political career into a military action that is not going the way it was planned. So therefore, I think that we are approaching a very dangerous escalation in Ukraine, and we're starting to see that in order to build a maximum pressure on Ukrainian government in order to capitulate, or at least to take on the requests from Kremlin, they will be basically shelling the civilian zones and killing number of civilians in order to put this pressure on the government. So therefore, I think that this will be first of all, it will be a very dangerous, very difficult to even to withstand for us the few upcoming days. And we have to be, ready with our answers as well, political answers, with assistance and everything, because next days will be heavy on everybody globally.
Thanks. The second question is then just about the strategic outcome from this, because I feel that what's happened now is as significant as when the Berlin Wall came down, or indeed the tragedy of 9/11. We are now decisively in new times. And it's been useful to understand your perspective that we do now need to shift from forward deterrence to forward defence. The blunt truth is that deterrence has failed, and therefore we do need to rethink our assumptions. Obviously, Russia's strategic weakness is its great border, and therefore fortifying the entire length of the border seems to me to make sense. But in terms of the Baltic, what do you think now will happen with Finland and Sweden? Do you think there is an interest that we share in encouraging encouraging Sweden and Finland to join? But then second, in terms of our capabilities, if we now know the Russian tactics are to basically send in long fires through artillery before then trying to put in airborne specialists and Chechen ground forces, do we now need to start investing in ground-launched cruise missiles in order to basically get round the Russian air access denial systems and create a new point of vulnerability for them? So a question for me about our alliances with Finland and Sweden, and then your observations on new defence capabilities that will be needed. Eva Maria, can I start with you?
Thank you very much. And of course, from Estonia's perspective, the more NATO allies in our region, the better it would be. And I know that in Finland, this debate strongly started also yesterday. But of course, it is a decision made by Finns, not by us. But I'm very glad that NATO has emphasized all the time that our doors are open for every democratic country here in Europe, so that we can together more efficiently protect our space of values. With regard to defense and deterrence, then I would leave it for military and defense ministers to go into the details, which exact equipment do we need, but definitely we need more. We must strengthen the NATO's air policing, air defense, also have more troops which have both a symbolic value but also real defense value. So we have to go forward with all these details. And of course, we have made very important decisions in NATO over the last year already, and now we just need to speed up with some of the decisions that we have made previously.
All right, thank you. Gabriela, what's your point of view?
Well, first of all, I would not be surprised that we might see a NATO enlargement even this year. The debates that are going on in Finland and Sweden a week ago might have seemed unrealistic that they would lead somewhere, but many things seemed unrealistic a week ago. So with that base, nothing is off the table. I would say as much. If it needs encouragement, I think Sweden and Finland joining NATO increases regional security. That is quite easy to say. It increases Baltic security, increases the Baltic Sea security, definitely. So, we're trying to take this position, not to give an advice to the governments, but I can say as much that definitely we would very, very much support this path. Secondly, the way we see it is that the vulnerabilities of Baltic region from military perspective could be used in order to limit our NATO's operational maneuvering space when it comes to regional security outside NATO's border. So I think that from a strategic point of view, it is imperative to fix it. It has to be very clear, and Russia has to know it, that Baltic countries are as defendable as any other part of NATO. That would give NATO allies much wider operational space. And then, I think additional decisions could be made in the future, not allowing Russia to rearrange the whole region, because if they're not stopped in Ukraine, obviously it's clear to many that they will not stop there. And there are many other places where they are maybe inclined to go. They are now currently in Belarus, which is already an absolutely different geopolitical situation in the region. Now they're in Ukraine. They could be in Moldova. They are in parts of Moldova, in Transnistria, and they could, their geography with a victory in this current war could expand. Therefore, in order to deter that and to allow more maneuvering space, I think that Baltics have to be secured. So this is important.
Yes, very useful. In terms of the vulnerabilities that need fixing, as you say, in the Baltic, what are the things that are top of your mind? What are the things that you think are most important?
Well, basically, we have to think then from all perspectives. We have given that a lot of time in order to prepare for something that everybody believed will most likely never happen. So we've kept increasing the capabilities for defense, more thinking about deterrence. Now it has to be actual defense. So there are places in the Baltics which have to be secured. That's maritime security, that's air defense, anti-missile defense. All these things, they have to be rethought, redrawn, and built in. There are many things happening, so I cannot say that nothing is being done. But I want to stress that in many cases we're still working on the previous doctrine of deterrence. It's like we're doing what we should have done a week ago. But this week we would better prepare for the next week to come, and we're thinking in these terms, not for next year, not for another decade, but basically what has to be done for the next week. Thank you. I agree with Eva that specific military details are best commented by MODs in my country as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Can I just ask, the difference between deterrence and defence is clearly a difference of mission. Are you asking other governments, forgive me, the Estonian government and the Lithuanian government asking other NATO governments to change the NATO air policing role from a deterrence role to a defence role?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both ever so much for joining us. I just want to drill really into the fact that we're obviously seeing increased hostilities and increased use of chemical weapons, thermobaric weapons and incendiary munitions. That has to result in an escalation further of response. I note that when we were talking about humanitarian zones, you mentioned a humanitarian corridor and that having to be policed. There is a big discussion within the UK about no-fly zones, and I think the position the government has come to is that there will not be a no-fly zone put in place. A humanitarian corridor requires some form of no-fly zone put in place to protect that humanitarian corridor. It'd be really helpful for me to understand how the position of your parliamentarians and the position of your governments on a no-fly zone across any parts of Ukraine, and frankly, if we're going to put it in place for a humanitarian corridor, you might as well put it in place more broadly, and whether the appetite is there for a no-fly zone across Ukraine, should we see particular escalations around those types of weapon systems, or whether it's just for humanitarian zones, and actually whether they're even willing to put planes in the air against Russian ones to protect a humanitarian corridor.
It is very likely that we are approaching a situation where we will see a lot of civilian suffering in the numbers that we haven't seen since the Second World War. And I don't think that it is right to take this question out of the table. If there are formats where we need to discuss it, I would. One of the options is, I think, UN could be that. I know that the Security Council is unable to come to the decision since a sitting member, a permanent member, is an aggressor in the war. But the UNGA, the General Assembly, definitely can discuss this, and they can discuss humanitarian corridors with the no-flight zones imposed on that. 2/3 of General Assembly can make a recommendation that this would be applied. I know that it's not an easy task, but I think it has to be done. I mean, at least tried. I don't think, politically saying, I don't think that there is a gray zone anymore. Every country, every member in UNGA has to make a choice. Which side are you on? And that choice has to be represented by a vote in the General Assembly. It might come to that. Yeah. To add to that, I know that there's discussion in many formats between allies, about the no-fly zones. I know that the issues concerning that, but I have to stress that probably we have to limit the current debate just on the humanitarian corridors, and the people would be allowed to leave the places and the cities where they are being killed, burned, shot at, and other horrendous things that are being done to them. They need to be allowed to leave. And I think it's our obligation to at least to grant them that.
And thank you. Just before we go to Estonia, I think my challenge on that is that humanitarian corridors, absolutely, we want to protect civilian lives, we want civilians to escape. But in essentially creating humanitarian corridors, we will remove all Ukrainian people who have a right to be there and allow them to flee and leave essentially behind the territory for Putin to take. So am I right in understanding that within Lithuania, and obviously you know the position of the UK government, there is an appetite within the parliament or government to potentially do a wider no-fly zone across wider areas, just limited to humanitarian corridors at this point?
Well, I think that, this is basically what is currently happening, and the discussion, at least in our government, is about, okay, so what is our answer to that? I mean, as with everything that happened throughout the last, days, we have to start somewhere. A few days ago, nobody believed that we can sanction SWIFT. Now it is an actual possibility. Nobody believed that we will make Europe a no-fly zone. I mean, forbid European airspace for Russian aircraft. Now it's forbidden, and all these things. So I think that we have to start somewhere. You go on with the debate. And if it's a European debate, I think that we can do it. If it's an alliance debate, we can do it. But then again, if it's not working that way, maybe we should start it in UN.
Thank you. And I should sorry, please.
Or go parallel tracks and start both debates simultaneously.
Thank you. And I should explain, my reason for asking isn't because I'm expecting our allies like you to go further. It's because I'm genuinely grappling with this question about if we were to put in humanitarian corridors that are protected by some sort of allied air force, what is the point when we might as well then try and go further? Because ultimately, the longer we leave things, the less chance we have to operate or manoeuvre in any way. It'd be very helpful to understand what the discussion is within Estonia, within your parliament and your government, again on no-fly zones more generally, and also particularly on humanitarian corridors.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this very important question, because what we see, there are hundreds of thousands of people either on the roads or in the basement of the apartment buildings and waiting to be evacuated from the country. And not only Ukrainians, but also our own citizens are still there, and we are trying to get them out. So the question is here, and of course, at the same time, we have to think how we could get these humanitarian corridors so that the whole international community supports it. Therefore, also I agree what was said with Gabrielius, that the UN Security Council resolution and position on that would be the best solution, and therefore today and tomorrow are very critical, because these discussions are taking place in New York. And at the same time, I come back to the initial point. We have to raise the cost for aggressor so that he would stop bombing civilians.
Thank
and
you.
This is this international cooperation that we do. We have to do it more.
Thank you. And my view is we should have put in a safe haven, but that would have had to have happened last week, and we could have done it in the West, but it's too late now. That's not possible. Is there an appetite within Estonia for action if it was only, for example, the Baltic states, Eastern European countries in the UK? Is there appetite for action that is more substantial, that is just Baltic and Eastern European states? Or is there a feeling that the US would have to be involved if there were any sort of stronger intervention?
From Estonian perspective, we very much support close coordination with the United States and also US presence, of course, in Europe. We welcome the recent decisions to increase US troops in Europe, and this is definitely very important.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got a few minutes left, and I know you've both got to run, so I just wanted to ask as a very last question, if I may. You both have large communities of citizens inside the United Kingdom. Presumably many of them will be feeling nervous about their own families as well at this moment. What are the areas that you think the UK government and indeed British people generally can help to support Estonians and Lithuanians inside the UK, and what areas should we be considering? The Minister from Estonia, perhaps first. No reason.
Oh, thank you very much. I believe that the Estonian citizens here in Estonia and in the United Kingdom as well, they are in good place. I think that we have to think how to protect people in Ukraine and also evacuate our people from Ukraine. This is the focus we have to focus at the moment, and also, of course, what we said before about defense, strengthening defense and deterrence in eastern flank of NATO, etc. But I think that our citizens in the United Kingdom, they are good, in good place.
Thank you.
I agree with Eva Maria. I think that whatever you're doing to reassure everybody in UK, about your decisions, about the Allied decisions, about assistance that we're providing, and about the the possible future outcomes is I think what every government is actually doing to inform and to keep our people informed and calm. I think that's everybody are doing that, and we trust that you will do a good job.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, thank you very much indeed to both of you, and I think particularly for your alliance, which, as we all know, manages to keep the United Kingdom incredibly safe by extending our borders and making sure we partner with strong allies. So I welcome to the possibility of working even more closely with you in the future. Thank you. On that, order.
Thank you.
Order.